If being Max Verstappen's teammate is the hardest job in F1, as Red Bull likes to claim, then finding the right teammate for him must be a close second. History tells us that sooner or later, the second driver gets the axe, but Red Bull's 2025 choice might burn two of them. Once it dismissed free agent Carlos Sainz from the picture, Red Bull's options for its latest driver lineup weren't massively inspiring, and it's gone with what it hopes will be the high-risk, high-reward option in Liam Lawson over the more experienced and, at the moment, faster Yuki Tsunoda. You should keep that word hope in mind because it's important, and we'll be revisiting it later in this video. Right now, the obvious loser from Red Bull's decision is Tsunoda, who's potentially been screwed over by Red Bull despite gradually ticking a lot of boxes. So while Lawson could come to suffer as well, we'll focus on Tsunoda for now. He's been the fastest non-Verstappen Red Bull driver for the last 2 years, he's the most experienced of the ones still standing, and he's made gains with his emotional control and his technical feedback. Despite this, Tsunoda's been trapped at the second team for an unprecedented 5th consecutive year, although his old teammate Pierre Gasly and Daniel Kvyat did each race for the team in 5 seasons across different stints around their unsuccessful brief spells at Red Bull Racing. Tsunoda has no reasonable hope of a promotion of his own, and Red Bull's not showing much interest in him beyond this year, maybe because his primary backer Honda is going to another team for 2026. So Red Bull's now openly talking about letting Tsunoda go after all. Red Bull Racing boss Christian Horner said that it doesn't make sense to keep him any longer if it cannot give him a bigger opportunity. He also admitted you can't have a driver in the support team for 5 years, you can't always be the bridesmaid. Although critics were inevitably quick to point out that Red Bull has already consciously inflicted this on Tsunoda. As a result of Red Bull activating its option on him in June last year, he's lost out on a likely move to somewhere he'd actually be wanted and could have a longer term future. That's where Tsunoda's been most hard done by. Other teams, including Haas and Audi, were known to have interest in him in spring last year. But now a problem for Tsunoda is that many teams have their lineup set through the first year of the new car and engine rules in 2026. A new team, Cadillac, is joining the grid, and Honda's switch to Aston Martin could potentially open a door there longer term, so there are some opportunities, but nothing as concrete or appealing as Tsunoda deserves on recent form. Ultimately, Red Bull had a contractual option and it isn't obliged to put him in the senior team, so it can do what it wants. But it's harsh on Tsunoda, whose only silver lining is it has now been made clear to him that he should seriously look at alternatives, and other teams have been put on notice early that he will most likely be available at the end of this season. The race was part of a group of media who spoke with Horner after Red Bull's driver decisions were made public in December 2024, and he admitted that circumstances have prompted Lawson's promotion to the senior team to be accelerated. This is awfully similar to Gasly's ill-fated step up in 2019, when Red Bull had to counter Daniel Ricciardo's move to Renault, and then Alex Albon's mid-season promotion that year when Gasly toiled. Gasly had a season and a bit of F1 experience when he became Verstappen's teammate. Albon had just half a year and hadn't driven an F1 car before pre-season testing. Red Bull's not blind to the similarities. Horner was asked if what happened with Gasly and Albon could happen again, and admitted the danger is there's a repeat of that. So Red Bull knows this is a risky move. Part of the logic for it is predictable and along the lines of what we heard last year. Horner suggests that Lawson's personality makes him better equipped to deal with the pressure than previous juniors, and said he's compared well against a much more experienced teammate in Tsunoda with big potential to improve further. But there were a couple more specific, interesting claims as well. First, Red Bull reckons that while the margins to Tsunoda were very tight in qualifying, its analysis suggests Lawson was actually faster than Tsunoda on race pace. How exactly Red Bull came to that conclusion is unclear, we just know it was based loosely on averages, but without knowing which stints were used and which caveats were applied, we have to be at least a little sceptical. Second, and more intriguing, is that Red Bull believes Lawson's similar driving style to Verstappen will permit the team to run its 2025 cars in a closer setup window than it's been able to previously. Verstappen's preference for a strong front end that allows for the car to be rotated quicker, and his capacity to handle the rear instability that can come with that, has been a cornerstone of Red Bull's car development and setup choices like adding more front wing for high-speed corners because he doesn't get spooked by the car moving around. When teammates have struggled to manage that as well as he has, the gulf in lap time and results has been huge. Perez handled it a little better than his predecessors, but would often succumb to similar issues as each season progressed. According to Horner, Lawson likes the same sort of things as Verstappen, so that should make the team's job in balancing its cars easier and aid Lawson's adaptation. Red Bull also anticipates its 2025 car having a wider working window than in 2024, which, if so, should be more forgiving too. And it may be that Red Bull's also learned its lesson in terms of expectations. Horner said they will look to protect Lawson from that, setting him a very broad objective to avoid having a 285-point deficit as Perez had in the final 2024 standings, which cost Red Bull the Constructors' title. According to Horner, that's helped by a much more overt positioning of Verstappen as the number one and Lawson as the young second driver, although we shouldn't kid ourselves, Verstappen's been the team leader, de facto or otherwise, for 6 years now. The most impressive thing about Lawson's two-part seasons in F1 is how he was immediately confident and racy. At times, he's looked like a more experienced racer than he actually is, although there have inevitably been moments his inexperience has shone through. But is he quick enough for the Red Bull role? That's the big question, and Red Bull doesn't know, just like it doesn't know if he can really handle the pressure. Such promotions are always a mix of hope and expectation, but this feels like a much bigger percentage of the former than befits a team of Red Bull's caliber and ambition. Even if Red Bull talks a good game about managing expectation, it has already said in the Lawson announcement that it expects Lawson to deliver outstanding results, which is a huge amount to ask and arguably more than Red Bull has ever asked of any junior in its history. Even its greatest successes, Verstappen and Sebastian Vettel, had kinder introductions to the top team than Lawson, as while he has broader career experience and age on his side, ridiculous as that is to say for a 22-year-old, those future four-time world champions spent one full season and a bit in the junior team before their promotions, and they weren't stepping into a team with the expectation that their drivers would support a championship bid that season. Another way to look at the decision is this: there are two basic question marks over Lawson. Will he be fast enough, and is he experienced enough? Whereas Tsunoda only has one real doubt attached to him: can he handle being Verstappen's teammate? It's an assumption that he will not be capable of being at his best alongside Verstappen or will implode from the pressure. Tsunoda can't answer his question without racing for Red Bull, whereas Lawson can ease the specific worries about him with a little bit more time at the second team, allowing a much greater sample set to evaluate his speed and capacity, building his experience and preparing him for the Red Bull seat in the future, which is the purpose the second team serves. Putting Tsunoda in the Red Bull gets the team the answer it needs on him. Putting Lawson in risks burning him before he ever realistically gets a chance to get going. Red Bull loses a lot more if the Lawson gambit fails, whereas if Tsunoda started 2025 in the Red Bull, flopped, and Red Bull dropped him mid-season or at the end of the year, what's it really losing there, given he's a driver they don't have faith in long-term anyway? And if they went down that route and promoted Lawson later, he'd be 2 or 3 times as experienced as he is now, so plugging him in then would be less of a risk. The only argument is a rock-solid belief that Lawson is a potential megastar, and therefore it's best to just put him in the car now, Verstappen style, and let him learn and grow with the team. But again, that can only be based on hope rather than expectation. The official line from Red Bull is that Tsunoda's motivation is to show that he warrants a Red Bull seat should the opportunity still arise in 2025. And if we take the view that Tsunoda could have been replaced mid-season if he was given the chance, the same can be true of Lawson, especially given Red Bull's history with driver changes, which Lawson has now benefited from himself. Horner's sort of hinted this is possible. While he obviously opened the door to Red Bull letting Tsunoda go, he did dangle the carrot that Tsunoda may be needed after all. As Horner put it, who would have thought 9 months ago we'd be sitting here talking about Liam Lawson being our driver for 2025. That shows how quickly things can change in F1, and Red Bull's told Tsunoda that performing well at Racing Bulls again in 2025 needs to be his primary focus so that he is first in the queue should Lawson suffer a fate like Ricciardo being brutally dropped mid-season last year. Based on all that's happened so far, that could just be lip service. The real question might be who gets promoted next, because there are 2 Red Bull drivers with potentially higher ceilings than Lawson that are well worth keeping an eye on. One is F1 2025 rookie Isaac Hadjar, who only really got the Racing Bull seat by default, because even though he was the Formula 2 runner-up, it depended on the shake-up sparked by Perez being moved aside and Red Bull cooling its interest in signing Williams Jr. Franco Colapinto. Hadjar has looked seriously quick in F2 and in Formula 3 before that. He's got a rawness about him that is exciting, although he needs to work on his composure and show that he won't be frazzled by the demands of F1. Arvid Lindblad is an even greater manifestation of that. The 17-year-old is exactly the kind of driver who can turn around Red Bull's misfiring driver record, and if he impresses on debut in F2 this year, there's no reason why Red Bull shouldn't repeat its aggressive driver promotion strategy and get him in the Racing Bulls car for 2026. Red Bull seems to recognise this too, as it's been quietly talking up Lindblad in a way it hasn't spoken about a junior for a long time. He's far more likely to be Red Bull's answer to Mercedes' Kimi Antonelli or Ferrari's Ollie Behrman than Lawson, who is up against it this year to prove he's more than just a stopgap solution.